Welcome back. Super excited. In this lecture, I'm going to talk about what social engineering is all about, the different kinds and types or tactics that attackers can use when they go about social engineering, and of course, how to prevent it as well. So, the US Cybersecurity Infrastructure Security Agency basically defines social engineering attack as an attacker uses human interaction to obtain or compromise information about the organization or its computer systems, right, or the network. An attacker may seem, assuming he's respectable or she's respectable, right? Could be an employee, could be a researcher, and even offering credentials to support that identity. However, by asking questions, that person, the attacker, can piece together enough information to infiltrate an organization's network. So if the attacker is not able to gather enough information from one source, that person may contact another source within the same company and rely on the information, right, of that particular source to add to the attacker's credibility, right? Basically, what that means is that some cybersecurity attacks exploit technical vulnerabilities in software, others exploit psychological vulnerabilities in human behavior. The most effective cybersecurity attacks often use both. So take a look at a couple of examples of social engineering attacks, and of course later on I'm going to talk about tips as to how to avoid social engineering attack. Next, let's take a look at the three basic types of tactics, whether it's in-person, phone, or digital. So in person, of course, the person physically being within the office premises or the enterprise organization's office, right? This could be on the phone. Over the phone, they have enough information about the victim that they can actually use the identity or assume the identity. And of course, the latest is the digital, right? This is through social media. For example, people post their birthdays or their phone numbers, sometimes their bank names on social media. So attackers can gather and piece together all of this information from not just one social media platform, maybe Facebook, maybe LinkedIn, maybe it could be others, right? And once they have enough information, then they're ready to attack. Next, let's take a look at the example of what social engineering is, right? So phishing is a fairly common and a popular form of social engineering. So these attacks typically use email or malicious websites to solicit personal information by posting as a trustworthy organization. So many times you visit a website that is not a secure site, but yet you end up giving or registering on their website by giving some pertinent information about yourself. So as an example, an attacker from the email perspective can simply send you an email, and that email seems to be coming from a reputable bank, for example. And once you receive that email, well, you see that it's a legit email, or sometimes even from the IRS, right? Or from your tax authorities. And typically you assume those emails to be correct and you open them, right? And those emails often suggest that there is a problem, there's an issue. So attackers take advantage of that particular event and certain times, such as natural disaster. This is in addition to how they can easily send you an email and try to gather your financial data by posing, there's an issue. Okay? So, and of course you respond to that, because if there's an issue in the email from your bank's perspective, right, then definitely you will respond. You will send them the information that they're looking for. Other types of phishing attack where the attackers can take advantage is natural disaster. COVID-19 is these days pretty popular. So attackers are posing themselves as legitimate websites where they have information about COVID-19 and people are just, jumping onto this website and trying to take a look at the information. Sometimes they ask the users to register and give personal information, and people just most times they just do it, right? They don't even take a look at the authenticity of the site. And others could be economic concerns such as IRS scams and major political elections. Next, let's take a look at the scenario, right? So let's say you have an attack scenario of social engineering. So in 5 simple steps, the first step, the attacker simply performs reconnaissance attack. And this is pretty important because attackers typically, they take their time. So they're not into any hurry of, penetrating a network, for example, or stealing information from you. They're really, what they're looking for is they're constantly taking a look at the network itself, okay? Whether it's social media, whether it's over the phone, whether it's the information about that person, for example, where the person works, when does he have lunch, where does he go, so those kind of things, right? And you can go in depth. So the first step is, once the reconnaissance is performed, the second step is the user then receives an email with a PDF file attachment, supposedly from, let's say, for example, a hospital supplier, okay, in this particular scenario. So now you, as a physician, for example, or the hospital employee, or the purchasing manager at the hospital, you're thinking, well, this is a legitimate hospital supplier that has just sent me an email with a PDF attached. And most often, the user opens in step 3 the attached file where essentially malware exists. Okay, so as soon as you open the PDF file, it executes the malware. And step 4 is that malware then steals the user's credentials and sensitive data. And that's, the key. That's what the attacker is looking for in step 4. And step 5 is malware then sends the stolen data to a remote user. So once, of course, the attacker has the information that the attacker is looking for, the attacker is going to sell it online, maybe in cryptocurrency, right? And there's so many other areas like dark web where typically attackers or this kind of information is sold. So this is a typical scenario of social engineering. Next, briefly, social engineering life cycle. So again, 4 steps for this life cycle. First is the information gathering, right? Just like reconnaissance. I've already mentioned this earlier, reconnaissance gathering, right? Second step is establishing a relationship. This is the time to fabricate a manipulative storyline. Could be through the phone, could be through email. Gaining trust is important, right, for the attacker. And third is the exploitation itself. So the attacker impersonates someone important, making a stressful demand that leads to a breach. And of course, the fourth is execution of the strategy. So here the attacker exits quickly and quietly with money or valuable information. So typically this is the social engineering life cycle. Phone phishing is also known as voice phishing or vishing, right? Is another kind of attack that hackers use to take advantage of human psychology in order to trick mobile device users into revealing sensitive information about themselves or their workplace. Common scenarios might include the caller pretending to be from your company's IT department, your bank, your internet service provider, or your telecom company as examples. So, how can you protect yourself from voice phishing? So, for beginners, you can simply ignore calls unless they are from trusted contacts, right? Friends or family members. So, if you want to check with your real organization that the hacker claims to be calling from, you can always visit the website for the company and call the customer service just to ensure. And this might sound obvious, but do not call the phone number suggested by the caller, right? And expect it to be trustworthy. Similarly, do not send any personal information using the text message or even respond to text messages coming from unknown sources, as these types of attacks become more and more sophisticated, right? So it is up to you to stay alert and always use caution. Next is, how do you actually recognize and respond to threats, right? I did talk briefly about that, but social engineering, where hackers are simply tricking the users to share their account or login information or credentials or sensitive information such as their social security number, their passwords, even their bank account numbers. So again, these are different kinds. It could be a phishing mechanism where they attack users by sending email, right? It's known as email-based hacking, or phishing, phone-based, or text-based phishing, or impersonation. Okay, so these are again, just recapping the 4 typical tactics. And finally, let's take a look at how to avoid being a victim, right? So first, you need to be suspicious of any unsolicited phone calls, visits, or email messages from anyone for that matter. If an unknown individual claims to be from a legitimate organization, just verify it again. Do not provide any personal information. Do not reveal personal or financial information in any email or over the phone. And do not send sensitive information over the internet for authenticating or checking a website's security. And if you're unsure, just verify by contacting the company directly. So I hope this helped. Very important, but most times in a typical scenario, social engineering is a very powerful way that the attacker can use to penetrate a network, a person's identity. With this, let's move to the next lesson.